Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of the review for team overviews. Part 1, I, I got as far as going through 8 teams. I will say the quality on 2 of them I was not happy with on the last 2, and so you know what? I said I'm going to take a break, pause, and I'm going to do a part 2 of this. And hopefully I can provide it with a little bit better context and quality because I felt like I was just running out of ideas. So let's get into it. So the team that we have here now is the Toronto Six. This is coached by Jay Jingles. Jay sucks. And so if we take a look here at our criteria, so we're going to take a look at the Firewater Grass Core. And I believe this team drafted Ogerpon first, if I'm not mistaken. So they got 2 of that right away with that core. And I know Primarina was pretty high on also for this team. So yeah, Firewater Grass Core complete. So therefore, this team would get a +1 for that. And then, oops, let's move that so I can keep count of score over here. And then we'll go to the Fairy Dragon Steel Core. So there's a Roaring Moon. That's the dragon. Primarina fits that role. It's got a really beautiful typing of water fairy, which is really cool. And we have Scizor, which is a steel type, and therefore this team gets another point for Fairy Steel Dragon Core. Now, do I think it's very good? Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think it fits. I don't think it's trying to make too much, forcing too much happen. In terms of like the synergies, like do I see them kind of working together? Yeah, I think so. I think overall that they has enough tools to cover each other. So, and we'll get a little more into that when we get into the obvious synergies portion. But I think the pretty solid Firewater Grass and Fairy Steel Dragon Cores. In terms of speed control, I think this team does have that. It's got the Friddraft, which is a Trick Room machine. It's very difficult to remove Friddraft in one shot. It is possible, and especially with the power level. But he's got a Roaring Moon, which is a big tool to try to do that. And then let's see what else. Does this team have immediate Tailwind? So if we look here, it does have Tailwind with Scizor. It gets Tailwind with Roaring Mid. And here, there we go, full screen so we can get a better image of it. It's got Sandy Shocks, it's got Torkoal, so you can go for potentially speed stuff. So yeah, overall, I'm going to give the team probably... I'll give it about a 0.7 for speed control, only because I would have really liked a Prankster Tailwind or a really, just obvious Tailwind Mon. And so, yeah, I mean, Roaring Mood at 119, very fast, Roar, same thing. Dilligan Hisui can cause some sort of, speed interactions because it goes really fast. So, you know what, I'll change my mind. I'll go to 0.8. I've sort of, convinced myself. And then our next criteria would be type diversity. I think this team has a really good type diversity pool. It's got double grass here. It's got double dark. It's got double fire. So I think there's a little bit of type overlap when it comes to that. And so I think we can probably give this team also about maybe adding a 0.8 to that. I think we'll give it 0.8 of a point. To do that, I think is pretty fair, which is good. In terms of defensive chart, so this defensive chart's pretty nice. It's weak to ground and flying, which, ground and flying are 2 types that are resisted by pretty few things. It's a pretty spammable thing, especially in Draft League, because not everybody's teams can have a lot of answers to it. So these are pretty 2 common weaknesses you'll see a lot of the time. So I'm not gonna knock it too hard for that. And then it's got 3 weaknesses to Ice and Rock and Fairy, which, again, very common weaknesses, hard to cover up because a lot of really good mons are weak to those things, which is sort of the niche on those, right? So they're not great defensive types, but Fairy is. But offensively, they can Ice and Rock can exert a lot of pressure, right? Because they hit a lot of really nice types, popular types. So I would say in terms of a defensive chart, I'll also give it a 0.8. I think is really nice. I think is pretty fair. In terms of offensive coverage, I think this team so it's got the cores down, and this is probably where we'll begin to maybe poke some holes in it. I would have liked probably a little bit better special attackers. Well, I know Zora Kisui is 125 and Sandy Shocks is 121. I don't think that's enough to say when I play this team I see physical. I don't really think, oh boy, I gotta watch out. This guy's got a A lot of special attackers. Now Torkoal can get a little bit out of hand in the sun with that special attack boost, and with the sun boosting a special attack, Terra Fire. So we know what it does. So it does threaten immediate damage, which is nice. On the physical side, you got the Roaring Moon with the really strong base 139, Scissor, Ogre-Pon, Heartflame. So this team has a lot of ways to activate itself to give it more attack. So on paper, while it might look like it doesn't have the most, it's got options. But I think overall, I'm gonna give it a 0.7 because I think the options, while good, require things in order to make them good. Like they're not just good out of the box, and so I think that there's a lot of asterisks in terms of how strong some of these mons can hit. Like they'll need a damage boosting item, they'll need the weather up, things of that nature to try to make them stronger. So I'm gonna give it the 0.7 for that. In terms of obvious synergies, we have a lot of them, right? So the Torkoal activates Roaring Moon. It powers up the Ogre-Pon Heartflame, the Lilligant Hisui. So this team really wants its sun. Primarina probably doesn't want to play too much in the sun. It's not known traditionally as a good water type that plays well in the sun. I mean, quite frankly, most of them don't, but just as a thing to note. Sandy Shocks as well is powered by I'm not sure I mentioned that. Sableye can give you also that weather support. In terms of obvious synergies, it does do well. It's a really good support mon, so it synergizes well. So I'm gonna give it a 0.9 only because the Primarina probably could have been better supported with this team. I know that you can get Rain Dance with Sableye, as I believe, and a lot of mons get it, right? But the Prankster Rain Dance is really nice. So yeah, I think it's pretty fair to give it the 0.9. In terms of BST total, I think this is where the team probably is going to struggle the most. Like I said about a lot of teams, I feel like because players were able to pick a lot of things that they were comfortable with, or mons that any mon they want, they tend to go for mons that they were comfortable with. And looking at this team, I think this team looks like, wow, these teams would all be around on a normal draft league team. And so I think that there's nothing too much on this team that you look at and you're like, whoa, how am I going to deal with that? I mean, Ogre-Pon Heartflame, yes. Torkoal, yes. Roaring Moon, yes. But outside of that, there's I think this team, and the Lilligant Hisui, I can throw it in there. But outside of those four, given the power level in this draft, I think it's going to struggle. And if you look again with their criteria of being over 90 to be considered to be a pretty solid BST team, it's missing that in 5 of the 6 stats. Now, speed again is the big asterisk, but at the same time, if we take a look at the speed distribution, this team's probably going to want to be getting Tailwind up or Trick Room up, right? There's really no in between, which is fine, right? It's not necessarily necessary that you have the fastest mons in the game, but there's no of those like sort of mix base 80 mons. Like I'm not sure that many of these mons need Tailwind to go because they're usually pretty slow, right? Usually you want to go in that 80 range to 80 to 70 range. There are mons that 75 to 80 range that want to get Tailwind up so they can start sweeping. This team doesn't really take advantage of it too well. And so on top of that, with its low BST, I'm going to probably give it, I don't know, probably give it a 0.4, just because I think the type synergies are pretty well, but I think it's pretty low in that sense. In terms of utility and support, this team has that. It's got a good amount of, with Sableye, it's got good utility, right? That's a really good Swiss Army knife. Ogre-Pon gets access to a lot of funny, moves that can be disruptive. Follow Me, obviously. Lilligant is something to look out for redraft as well. So I'll give it good marks on that. So I'll probably give it a point. You know what? I'm going to take back. No. I'll give it a point. I'll give it a point for that one. Awesome. So that gives it to the 7.4. And in terms of weather, I mean, this team has it. It's got the sun. It's got the Sableye. It's got good weather control. So I'll probably give it a 0.8 for that. I keep going back to the BST. It keeps staring me in the face, and I feel like the 0.4 was a little too generous. So I'm probably gonna knock 2 points off of it. Unfortunately, 0.2 off. I'm gonna give it the 0.2. The only reason I give it a 1 is because you have a mon that has a stat over 190 out the box, right? On your attacking and I'm sorry, 120 out of the box, and you have 3 here, but those special attackers are not considered to be traditionally too powerful. So Raikasui is very techy mon, and Sandy Shocks, while it's at 121, it can sometimes give you that underwhelming damage output. So I'm gonna subtract the 0.2 for that. So this team's gonna be overall, it's gonna be an 8.0, which I think is pretty solid. I think this team is going to have a lot of tools to play in a lot of different games. It's a very balance heavy core, and I think this team's going to be really fun to use. So it'll be cool to see how he integrates that, makes it happen. Cool. So for the next team, let's get that team in here. Values only. This is going to be Metro Metagross, coached by Spades. So if we look here, we look at our criteria, right? So we'll go with our Fire, Water, Grass core. So if we take a look at Heatran, it's got the Heatran, it's got Iron Leaves and Suicune. Really cool, really nice, bulky Fire, Water, Grass core, so you get a point for that one. If we look at the Fairy Steel Dragon, so we got Dragonite, Heatran, and Klefki, so that's good. There's a good Klefki's got that really nice dual typing that everyone's a fan of Fairy and Steel. In terms of speed control, this team's fast, right? So if you take a look at it, it's got fast mons, really fast mons on it. Or I guess Champow's really fast, right? Mousehold's 111, so this format it can go fast. So I think it has. Let's take a look. Does it have any Prankster Tailwind? It does not. It's got slow Tailwind, or I should say medium speed Tailwind. It's got the Thunder Wave spread with Klefki, which is nice. Mousehold is very viably fast, so I mean it can control things on you. But I think overall this team might sometimes struggle to get into position against like a little more aggressive teams that are really fast. Given that it's speed tiers, while these mons are, like I said, they're fast, but in this format where there are a lot of really fast Pokemon, it might struggle a little bit. It all depends on the matchup between this team's fastest mon and the opposing team's fastest mons. If those mons do well into these fast mons, then it'll probably tend to maybe struggle. So I'm gonna give it a 0.7. I'm gonna give it a 0.6 for that. No, 0.7. 0.7 is fair. And then in terms of type diversity, so this seems interesting because it's got that Fire Steel, it's got that Steel Fairy typing. Right, I know you would say, well, they're type overlapping, but those two types individually are very cover each other or cover their weaknesses really well. They have a lot of type immunities if you look here. Well, they have the two, right, and then Klefki also has two type immunities, but they're resistant to so many different things, and these two typings are just very invaluable. So I would give it a sort of a pass in terms of having that too much type overlap. In terms of type diversity, I think the rest of the team does a pretty good well of not really having anything that repeat. I mean, you have the Psychic repeat, but I'm and Monkey Dory is interesting, but not to get too far ahead in terms of offensive synergies. But I think the team is pretty well covered for there. I'm gonna give it the 0.8. I think 0.8 is pretty fair. And then we'll go into the defensive chart. So if you look at this defensive chart, it's nice. It's only weak to Rock and Ghost from looking at that. And there's one immunity there and one resist and Ghost. So those could be pretty problematic. And then it's got a lot of just neutral matchups, right? Again, ground being that really tricky one to navigate. And so I think in terms of defensive diversity, I'm probably going to give it a 0.7. I think that's pretty fair. Nah, you know what? I'm gonna give it a 0.8. Let's give it a 0.8. I think that's pretty good. In terms of offensive coverage, so I think this team can hit a lot of different things really well. So if we take a look at the overall, so he's got two mons over 130, and those mons usually have a good time, and also Chanpao, right? It's got the minus boost. Annihilate's a win condition in and of itself. It's got three mons over the base 120, right? So I believe that's two. Yep. So it's got 5 mons in total, which is good. It's a good split. Usually you want to have one of each, right? But in this format, you probably want to have at least 2 of each. And this team sports 3. So I like that these mons don't need too much to get going. They're pretty much out of the box. Monkey Dory makes me a little bit nervous because I know Monkey Dory has always looked really good on paper. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's got access to Mousehold, which has its technician move that's really nice, Pop Bomb. Iron Leaves also is another one that I think I've seen in the past. It always looks good, really good on paper, but when you comes to usage, I think it might struggle. I think the lack of electric terrain might hinder it a little bit. I've seen this thing drafted in formats where legendaries restricteds are available, and it pairs really, really well with Miraidon. So yeah, I think in terms of again, but I think in terms of offensive coverage, this team's got a lot of tools. Annihilate a win condition. Champal, we know that thing can go off with sort of ruin. Annihilate E speed, E speed and can go really hard. Champal's there, right? That's a really spammable, just easy out of the box. Just start clicking attack. And yeah, so I'm gonna give it probably a point. I'll give it a 0.9 for that. Yeah. Oops. Let's go back to this one. Plus 0.9. Awesome. And then for obvious synergies, Champal Dragonair. That's the biggest one that screams at you. Mousehold Annihilate. Klefki plus most things. Heatran plus Heatran and Suicune's also a pretty solid one. They cover each other pretty cool. Zapdos is probably the one I haven't mentioned too much. Zapdos fits really, really well with the ground types that want to spam against Heatran. And it switches in really, really well to a lot of interesting things like grass that once hit Suicune, right? So I think this team's got that down. I'm actually gonna probably give it a 1 because I am give it a whole point for that because I really like the obvious synergies that this team's kind of got going on. In terms of BST and stat totals, I think that this team, if you take a look here, it does really, really well. It's got 4 stats over 90, which again I think is the minimum criteria in this sort of to meet to try to be considered to be pretty strong. And a couple mons over 600, which is cool. He's got pseudo legendaries, right? He's got a pseudo legendary here, but it also basically he translates essentially a legendary. So yeah, I'm probably gonna give it. I'll give this team a plus a 0.8. I think that's pretty fair. And then we'll go to utility and support options. And so utility and support, it has the Klefki, it's got Mousehold for support. I think in terms of utility, it has a lot going for it. However, I do think, utility meaning it's got Tailwind, it's got Follow Me, it's got Beat Up Strat, it's got ways to activate the other mons. It's got the Beat Up Strat, right? It's got Champal with the Extreme Speed, right? Which are all really, really good things. But in terms of support, setting up Thunder Wave and screens and stuff, it really only kind of falls on the Klefki to do that kind of a thing. Yes, these other mons get it, but they're primarily never used that way because if you're using them for that, then you're probably losing out on things that they're better at, right? If you're having to force that matchup, it feels like you're forcing the matchup at that point. So I think the team might struggle a little bit in terms of having a good amount of utility. So I'm going to give it about a point. I'll give it a 0.7. Because I still think that there's decent things on here for that. In terms of terrain and weather control, so there's no terrain. There is Rain Dance and there is Sunny Day, so there's Prankster on Klefki. I'm going to give it a half a point for that. I think just because there's no obvious setter, it's going to probably struggle in that department. Doesn't mean that it can't function or it can't fight in that area, but I think that's probably where it lands. So this team overall is going to get an 8.1 if we add everything out, which is really good, which is pretty much in line with most of the teams. I think this is a really crafted team. It's got obviously a lot of type synergies or a lot of obvious synergies that are really, really nice, and it'll be fun. It'll be a tricky team to play against because I think that there's with the different combinations, it'll be tough to kind of figure out which are the best ones that are going to be hard to deal with. Cool. So next team that we will take a look at. Let's fix these a little bit, right? Slowbro Galar, Tornadus Incarnate, and Zapdos Galar. So this team is the Nova Scotia Lumberjacks, and the player is Tiny Gambit King. So let's start off by taking a look at our criteria, right? So we'll start off by taking a look at the Fire, Water, Grass core. So there's a water type, there's a grass type, and there's a fire type. So that gets a point for that, which is good. This is a good core. It's got the Rillaboom. It's got the Rillaboom. The Rilla God. It's the man. Rillaboom's the man. And so we'll go Fairy Dragon Steel. So it's got the Latias. It's got the Dragon, the Excadrill. Then now there is an absence of a Fairy type, which is interesting on this team. So it's going to get a 0.6 for that. And then we'll get, in terms of speed control, it's got Prankster Tailwind. Oh, yeah, that's going to be really nice. Now, I think the one thing that I've noticed is that there's only one Trick Room Mon on this team. So I think this team can be susceptible to teams that have a heavier form of Trick Room, because this team does kind of want to play in that really fast range. If you take a look at its speeds here, right? These Mons can all go decently pretty fast, and it's got ways to double speed here, right? With the obvious Sand mode, with the Excadrill. So this team doesn't want to go fast. I think it might struggle against teams that are more geared towards winning in Trick Room. So in terms of speed control, I'm probably going to give it 0.6 in that category. I just think the lack of Trick Room setters is going to really set this team back in a lot of different types of matchups that can be tricky. In terms of type diversity, I think this team does a pretty good job of having very minimal type overlap. It's got the Psychic overlap, but that's okay because Slowpoke, Galar, and Latias play very differently. But outside of that, I mean, there's really not too much else. I mean, it's got the flying double up here with Tornadus and Zapdos Galar, which is okay because you got the fighting type to overcome it. But still, that might be problematic potentially. This team isn't weak to electricity, but it is neutral into it, so it could be an interesting thing. So in terms of type diversity, I'll probably give it a 0.7. I'm gonna give it a 0.8 because I think that it did a good job of not doubling up too much on types, which is cool. In terms of defensive chart, now this team has 4 weaknesses, right? 4 obvious weaknesses here, and then it's got a lot of neutralities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would lead me to believe that I think that this team might have some problems defensively. It's got some good offensive typing, but I think in terms of defending, it could struggle. But now I look at the team though, and it's a very balanced core, right? My Milotic and Rillaboom kind of scream balance at you. Excalibur is sort of in that awkward setup tier, so it also does really, really nice with impairing with them. Sneasers does really good in terms of disruptive Mon, right? So I think in terms of defensive synergy, it might struggle a little bit. So but I still think it's pretty well covered in terms of switch-ins. I know the chart, just because you have to put all the Mons on one chart, but realistically, right, you're not always bringing all these Mons at one time. So I'll probably give it a 0.8 for that. I still think that the type synergies defensively they cover each other really well. This team's really hardcore balance. In terms of offensive coverage, I think that T-Tar, Excadrill, really offensive, core. And if we take a look at, that's the one that jumps off the page. If we look at any stats over 120, it's got 4 Mons, 5 Mons, and above 120 range, right? And if we look at the special attackers, now this is where it might struggle, is that there's kind of an imbalance there. You don't really need it. You don't really need an assault vest too hard against a team like this. It does have special attackers, but its special attackers need a little bit to get going. Especially since some of these need the setup. I mean, I know Latias can hold its Soul Do, I believe what it's called. But yeah, this team might struggle in the special attacking department. And I know you might say, 125, 110, nothing to scoff at. Again, in a format like this, where there's just every team has so many bulky Mons, I think it's going to struggle with that. So I'm probably gonna give it a 0.6 for that. Well, it has a lot of overwhelming attackers, right? Like physical attackers that can be overwhelming. So I'll give it the 0.7. I'll give it the 0.7. I think overall that's a pretty good thing where we're at. I think in terms of obvious synergies, it's got a lot of them, right? So it's got Excadrill, Tyranitar, it's got Rillaboom plus Sneasler, right, to activate on Burden, Tornadus plus, I mean, pretty much kind of you name it, right? It can just double his speed. I think Tornadus is sort of the interesting pick because I think Tornadus really fits on teams that have Mons that really want to go really fast. A lot of these Mons don't need that type of support when we look at it, right? Rillaboom does usually want to go that fast, but Milotic is more of a bulky setup user. It really is just Excadrill, right? It just probably gives another form to power up the Excadrill, which is good. And speed's always good, so you always want to double the speed. And it has taunt to try to go against it, but again, Tornadus you can kind of leave next to anybody. It doesn't matter. It's disruptive. It gets Prankster Tailwind. It works. So in terms of obvious synergies, I'm probably going to give this team, give it a 0.9. Only because I think Tornadus could have had maybe a better, like a partner, an obvious one, or one of the Urshifus, right? Just as a format, which was available in this draft, since we could draft whatever we wanted. But not saying this team should have, but you get the point. In terms of base stat total, Now, this is another thing where I think this team might struggle a little bit. It's got a lot of under 90s. I know it's because we're combining everybody together, but there's not a lot of mons on this team that are like, wow, pow, like, dang, like you got all like, you got all that firepower. Like, it's not too much on the team that you look at it that can be a little overwhelming, and I think that's pretty evident by the 4 stats under 90. So in terms of that, I'll probably have to give it. It's hard, but I'm probably gonna have to give it a 0.6 for that. Yeah, 0.6. 0.6 feels kind of high. I'm gonna put 0.5. I'm gonna put 0.5. Yeah, 0.5. Okay. And then in terms of utility and support options, I think this team has a good amount of utility. Tornadus is a good support mon. It likes to go fast as well. But in terms of utility, I mean, it gets the Rillaboom, but I know my little gets set up. It gets Tailwind through Latias. I think this team might struggle a tiny bit, mostly because, the Mons, while they get utility, they're Mons that like to click offensive buttons. So, like, for example, Taunt on Zapdos Galar. I mean, you usually probably don't want to be doing that. You want to be attacking with it. It can exert a lot of offensive pressure. So I'm probably going to be giving it maybe a 0.6. I'll give it a 0.7 just because I still like that it has a lot of different options for that. In terms of terrain control, this is the first team that, I'm sorry, this is another team that has terrain, which is great. Grassy Surge is really, really good ability, and so terrain control, it gets a lot of points for that. Tornadus gets, I think, pretty much just about any weather you could be looking for. Yeah, Snowscape. I think minus Sandstorm. I think still got Sandstorm. Oh, it does get Sandstorm. Yeah, I mean this team's got it on that department, and it's got weather with Tyranitar. So yeah, it'll get a solid point for that. So that gives this team a total of 8.2, which is really good. I think that's pretty fair of this team. This team's really cool. It was really well drafted, and look forward to see how this team kind of works. It's got a lot of cool tools. Cool. And so our last one that we have here is, let's see, it's going to be Gazzle. So let's see, Ogerpon, Wellspring, Weezing, Galar, Thundurus, Incarnate, and Ursaluna Blood Moon. Awesome. So yeah, this team, like I said, is coached by Gazzle. This team's called Jersey Venusaur. And so if we take a look off here for our first part, Fire, Water, Grass Core, it's got Entei, Ogerpon, Wellspring. Boom. Awesome. That fun fact, I took that to my very first, those two in my very first VGC tournament. I actually took 3 of these months to my very first VGC tournament. I took Entei, Ogerpon, Wellspring, and Raging Bolt on the same team, so that's pretty cool. Bonus points for me. But yeah, no, so you guys got that really nice Entei Wellspring combo. It goes so well into a lot of different things. Entei obviously has inner focus, so yeah, I'm loving that core. You get a +1 for that. In terms of Fairy Dragon Steel, you got the Bronzong for Steel type. You have a Fairy type of Weezing Galar and Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt's a monster in terms of for a Dragon type. It's probably one of the best stat distributed mons ever created. So that's going to be really, really fun to use. And then Weezing Galar is a very disruptive mon, and Bronzong's a Trick Room mon. So I think the core, it's pretty solid. I'm not quite sure how they synergize with each other very well, but yeah, I still think the team works. So you get a point for the Fairy Dragon Steel core. Speed control. Now I don't believe this team gets clear and obvious Tailwind. It has Iron Jugulis, right? So Booster Energy Iron Jugulis is a very fast, Tailwind option. In terms of look at the speed stats, it doesn't have anything that wants to take advantage of speed too much. I know there's Little Blood Moon, there's a Turbo Bear option that became quite popularized in some of the earlier meta regulations, but I just don't know too much. It's got Trick Room, so it's got great Trick Room setters. I think Bronzong Mimikyu is going to be really, really good. So I think in most matchups, it's going to probably want to be setting up the Trick Room moves. So I'm going to give it a point, only because I don't like that you only have the one Tailwind option. I'm going to give it a 0.8. I think that's a pretty fair representation. terms of type diversity, I think this team nails it down pretty well. I don't think that there's too much type overlaps. You know, having too much fairy is never too much of a bad thing. Fairy is a really tough thing to get around to having enough, you know, a good one on your team. And there's Mimikyu's I think is pretty solid, and Weezing has its niches. So yeah, it's pretty good. It's got 2 electric types. They're not weak to the same thing, so it doesn't matter. It's got the 1 weaknesses for ground types. Raging Bolt suffers from that, but Thunderous doesn't, given its part flying. So yeah, I think this team has pretty solid type diversity. So I'm gonna give it a 0.8 for that also. I think that's pretty cool. Oops, messed up my math calculator here. Okay, and so what we will do next is we'll take a look at defensive chart. So its defensive chart, it's got 2 weaknesses. Again, that Ice and Rock. A lot of good mons are weak to those, so completely fair. And it's got just 2 neutralities. So overall, this team covered up its defensive holes pretty well. And Ogerpon, Wellspring, a lot of defensive bulky pivot mons here, which is cool. It's sort of an off-balance team. You look at these mons and you're like, oh wow, these are kind of nice. The fire, I mean, this Ogerpon and Entei are really nice together in terms of switch-ins and things of that nature. But yeah, this will be a good team. So yeah, I think in terms of type diversity, I'll probably end up giving it also just a man, this is a hard one. Should I just give it a whole point? I'll give it a whole point. Let's do it. Let's give it a whole point. And then let's go for... oh, sorry. I think we were looking at defensive chart. Yeah, we were looking at defensive chart. So yeah, it'll get a point for defensive chart. I like it. It's pretty solid. In terms of offensive coverage, I think this team... Let's take a look. Let's take a look at what it's got. So in terms of mons over stat distributions over 120, so it's only got 1. Ogerpon Wellspring's at 120 and Entei's at 115. It gets really high base power, and there's Defiant Thunderous. And it gets offensive fairy, which is nice. But there's nothing too clear and obvious with that attacking that's going to make me, you know, quiver too much. And again, there's no special attacker over 120, so I think this team might struggle a little bit offensively to exert too much damage. I think this team could be very susceptible to screens. It's going to have a hard time breaking through it with the lack of a fighting type. There might be Brick Break somewhere that I'm probably not looking at. I think Thunderous gets it, and I think Blood Moon gets it. But I think having to deal with that is going to be probably one of the bit trickiest things. So in terms of offensive coverage, I'm probably going to give it a half a point for that. I just think this team might struggle to do some damage at some points. It's going to have to really fight hard to keep good positioning in games. In terms of obvious synergies, let's see. Entei Ogerpon is a pretty solid one, mostly because the redirection of the water type moves into Entei. Redirection in general with Mimikyu is pretty nice. Iron Jugulus, you know, I think this team might struggle with a little bit of the obvious synergies. It's good. Look, it's got a little bit of that like bunch of good stuff pieced together syndrome a little bit. Not saying that these mons you can't just throw 2 of them together. They can do their obvious roles, but I think Weezing Galar is going to have to be a big sort of mon that makes things go with its neutralizing gas in some matchups, just because a lot of these mons actually don't care too much about their abilities. So yeah, I'm gonna have to probably give this team. I'll give it a 0.6 for that. I'll give it a plus 0.6 just because I'm sure there's a lot that I'm missing here. Maybe I'm missing something, but I just don't see too much in terms of that. So in terms of BST total, I think this team nails it down pretty well. Probably the best of a lot of the teams we've looked at. It's got a lot of mons over 90. It's got a lot of like, whoa, how am I going to deal with that? Raging Bolt, Ursaluna, Entei. You know, it's got a lot of really bulky mons that are like, dang, it's going to be tough to get rid of, that are all on the same team. So I'm going to probably give it a 0.9. The reason why it's not a 1 is because there's an 89 here, and I get it. It's just, but I can't. It's plus 0.9. It's still really good. I mean, come on. In terms of utility and support, I think you got the utility with support with Thunderous. Thunderous is a pretty support mon. I think utility this team might struggle a little bit. I think Weezing Galar's ability is a utility in and of itself. Sacred Fire is also a bit of a utility move because it can also burn pretty easily and it's pretty spammable. Jugulus also gets Snarl, so it's got mons that do pretty decent well. Mimikyu gets its own moves. I mean, utility Ogerpon. So I'll probably end up giving this team maybe a 0.7. I think is kind of where we're gonna be at. To put it in terms of terrain and weather control. I think that this team, let's see, so it's got Rain Dance. Okay, so yeah, so I figure the genies, they're all pretty they're all pretty proficient with weather. They all kind of get in against prankster weather. Um, Now there is no, and Aaron Juggless, I believe Aaron Juggless can get weather. Yeah, it does. It does get weather. There's not much. There's kind of lack of terrain on this team. Um, let's take a look. Let's just put. I think it's electric terrain. Yeah. So okay. So there's prankster electric terrain. So I think this team has options to make terrain work. But I'm probably gonna end up giving it a 0.6 for that. I think that's pretty fair for where this team can go, or for that. Now I think this let's add up the score. So for Gaz's team, this goes to 7.9. So that's pretty solid. So to recap, um, the recap all the scores. We're gonna say we're gonna go. I'll start from the bottom to the top, just based on scores. Um, Villa Blanca Belly Gods is gonna be a 7.6, and then what's the next one? Here I put. Oh boy, losing track. Oh, Munching Munchlax is a 7.6. 7.7 is Las Vegas Corviknights. Let's go to the next highest one. So 8.0 is the Toronto 6. Oh, Jersey Venusaur is 7.9. Toronto 6 is 8.0. 8.1, I think Metro Metagross has that. Garchomp's Goliaths has an 8.1. And then Los Angeles Linoones is an 8.2. Cambridge Camerups is an 8.2. And then I believe that's all of them. Oh, no, Nova Scotia Lumberjacks is an 8.2. And then 8.3 we have Supernova Jirachi. Yeah, Kev sucks. And then I believe the highest rating that I gave out was Trixie Trico's was to Otto. Funny enough, because he got the Dozogiri. Oh boy. So yeah, if I missed anyone, I'm sorry if I missed it on the list. I was kind of going off what I wrote down as I was going through, so didn't formally filter them. But yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. Leave comments. Hate on me if I miss something, and I stumbled a lot. So in a lot of different areas, but yeah, this was a lot of fun to do. It's my first time ever doing something like this. So yeah, feels pretty good. Good luck everybody with this season, and I look forward to playing you guys. Alrighty, have a good one. Peace.